Hi everybody. Welcome to the results of data-enabled short-range mobility. This was a workshop we gave here at Munich Creative Business Week. And we had some very exciting days putting together not only the mural behind us, but some true concepts of how data is going to change the way we move and live in cities.
From the perspective of the shoes.
Great. So let's start with a round of introductions,
Yes.
and then we'll show you some of the results of what happened here.
Yes.
Julian?
Yes. Well, my name is Julian Kahl. I'm the founder of the Responsive Fashion Institute. We're based in Munich, and we have been testing and experimenting with ways of how to create the future of fashion in a digital and analog or physical way. So we have been doing events and conferences about machine learning in fashion and the way how you use and visualize data. We also built with some very great partners from the UK some VR spaces. We experiment with the whole issue of digital fashion, and we also do some research about material research in Ethiopia, in East Africa. So we're based in Munich, and maybe I can just add something about the space or the location we're streaming from today. It's a fantastic place right in the heart of the city, the Rindermarkt, the city of Munich, and it's a place which is called the Ruffini store. Everyone from Munich probably knows the Ruffini house, which has been renovated extensively recently. And on the first floor, there's lots of creatives from Munich who have a possibility to rent an office there. And it's a great community and it's limited to a certain time. And we have like this pop-up store now till the end of June, where we can really, everyone can show what they're doing. And there's like authors and there's publishers. Someone is creating postcards and T-shirts and music and lots of fantastic things. So please welcome and come and check out the store. And we're streaming from the store today, so we will be open till 4. So if you want to say hello and have a look at what we've done here, so we're going to show you some prototypes as well. So thank you for everyone for being here. I would like to thank the sponsors as well. It's the city of Munich, it's Bayern Design, and it's also the state of economic development and energy from Bavaria. So,
Excellent.
and I'm very happy to do this with Troy together. We got introduced by a dear colleague of yours, and it's fantastic. It's been a fantastic few days, and really looking forward to showing you what we've done.
So I'm Troy Noctegal. I am the professor of fashion technology at Amsterdam University of Applied Sciences. I'm here with the Center of Creative Innovation. We're looking at crazy new ways to put data and shoes together, and it was a really great opportunity to come to a different city and see how this city would put that data together in a different and interesting kind of way. One of our workshop participants and great colleague is Christina here. We'll let her go next.
Sure, thanks, Troy. Julianne, thanks for having me. My name is Christina Thiele. I'm a one of the co-founders of ArtsXR, an immersive production studio in London, UK. And we specialize in world building and in the metaverse. So we created some virtual spaces for the shoes as well.
I'm going to show you later. So.
And we're joined here today by Nicolene Van Enter, the leader of Footwearology. I'll let her say hi as well. She's going to be giving us some feedback on our shoes.
Yeah, hello guys. Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm hearing all kinds of interesting things that I did not know yet because I just came from a business trip. So I already have lots of things in mind that we should probably connect on later. But I am based in Barcelona. We are an innovation center for the footwear industry. We indeed also do a lot with responsive technology. We work on new methods of product creation, mainly for fully automated local manufacturing to set that up, not just in Europe, but throughout the world. We work in biotechnology. Anything that can really help the industry forward. So yeah, I'm very excited to see the results of today and to be inspired and hopefully be able to contribute some thinking.
Great, thanks.
Fantastic. Maybe we should say something about our setting as well, what you see in the background, because we started off everything with a lunch, when was Wednesday? Wednesday, and we had some people from the city of Munich and from the city of Amsterdam and the creative industry, NL. And we just had some makers and shakers from both regions as well here with us. And over lunch, we just really planned the this idea about mobility from the perspective of shoes. So we asked all the participants over the lunch, over meeting, over getting to know each other, to scribble out some ideas, which we asked them to do on the tablecloth, which you've seen behind us. And Troy's going to take that to the Technical University of Amsterdam, and I'm going to embroider all those notes and drawings and taste. And throughout the workshop that we did yesterday at the Munich Urban Collab at the maker space there. So thank you again to all the team there, and particularly Julia Christiansen from the city of Munich, who opened the doors there for us. We worked in the mobility lab of the local transport initiative MVG or the SVM, and thank you again to all the team there to having us. And yes, so what you see here, it's going to be an ongoing process. We're going to add more notes, going to be more details and drawings, and fill the space. So this is like the first data visualization of this initiative, DESRM.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, we spent a day having lunch with the different people from the cities and understanding what they wanted, and then we had people come from all over Europe and all over Germany to join us in a workshop for 2 days where we digitally fabricated our ideas and kept on filling out this tablecloth in front of us. So it was good to have the area kind of in the middle, so the workshop participants jumped right in and started really working on the different shoes that we were looking at in the concept for data-enabled short-range mobility. What I think is really interesting about what's happening in the world today is that we're really getting to smart cities, and these smart cities are generating data through all kinds of crazy and new and interesting ways. Philips Lighting, for example, now has audio microphones in many of the light posts that they're putting up in their smart cities lighting. So if there's loud noises like gunshots or just congestion, they can tell which part of the city has noise and which part of the city doesn't have noise. And so we really began with this idea of what would it be to navigate through the city and be in the city based upon your shoes. Now, when Google Maps opens or closes, it takes a picture. And while they're looking at the surface of the street, usually, we notice that your shoes are in that picture too. So we really started off with this idea of how is the data that we're constantly engaging with, whether it's in our pocket, whether it's the city itself that's generating the data, how does that really affect what we are, how we're moving and how we're living and interacting in a city? And what would it mean to do that differently? What would it mean to consider some of that data as we started to build shoes and understand shoes? And over the 2-day process, we came up with 4 big concepts. The 4 concepts that we really came up with were the ideas of visual. There's the cameras and our phones that are taking pictures, and then our phones know as we're moving, how we're moving. So that led to cadence, the how we move, depending on which shoes we wear, we move differently, and that might tell us about where we can walk and where we can, where we can move throughout the city. It's been very fun being in Munich and watching how many people are wearing high heels on the cobblestones and with the big spaces in the street, making it really hard because it's very much people looking straight down at the ground, trying to navigate the city that they're in. And so, we consider bikes a lot, we consider scooters a lot, we consider cars and all these other ways of getting around, but we never look at that last mile. So like how people move and how they're interacting in spaces, I think is really interesting for the shoe creators of this world. So the last 2 subjects we did was sound. So this idea that we have big microphones being implanted into things these days. Not only is it the Alexa in your home, but they're starting to put these things into the city as well. Because when you apply AI to sound, you can find crazy, new, and interesting things there.
And also with the research, the recent research, or the realizing that there's research missing on the noise pollution as well in the city, because there's more and more research showing that it's really a health issue with the noise pollution, and to really integrating that to mobility from the perspective of the shoes rather than cars where we have electric cars where there's sound engineers or sound designers to add that. So really consider what kind of noise is being produced in a mobility from shoes or within our environments.
And the companies that make the navigation software, they really optimize for efficiency. They're always trying to get you there the fastest. Mm-hmm. They're not optimizing for the soundscape of the city you live in. They're not optimizing for the surface texture of the city you live in and how you might have different needs for those. So you want to make a phone call and you're walking down the street. Can Google tell me the quiet way to get to where I'm going so that I can walk through someplace quiet and have that phone conversation without a million things screaming in the background? And then the last area we jumped into was the virtual. What are virtual shoes and what do virtual shoes mean?
So we took 3 headsets, Quest headsets, and went into software called Gravity Sketch, where we created collaborative room and created some shoes in this space together. And then we created a WebXR platform on Frame, and you can go in and see those shoes on a browser-based WebXR platform. So this was another way of visualizing shoes that are co-created in a virtual space.
And also, all of that without any limitations of gravity or of, really certain different perspective of how to design things, which was, I think, a really interesting experience for everyone participating in the
workshop. And no
workshop.
physical limitations, because obviously in virtual you can do anything.
Yes.
You can be upside down if you want to.
You have the design
you can
fly around you.
It's like wearing shoes in space.
Yes.
They're not actually for walking.
Except you're on Earth.
Yes.
Your feet on the ground. But you're just pretending. That's all right.
Definitely. So we had some samples to show you, and then some of the virtual things that we'd like to show you what we made today. So we started off with looking at visual. And we're putting the shoe together still, but we had a really fun artist from Berlin who's originally from South America, Camila, and she was really looking at ants. So if every time we open Google Maps, it's taking a picture of what's going on around us, and so I'm sitting here trying to navigate through Google Maps, and it looks down at the shoe. What if I don't want it to see the shoe, or what if I wanted to know exactly which shoe I'm wearing? So we were really looking at this idea of what's usually on the ground anyways, and Camila was looking at these fire ants and how the fire ants are very dynamic and they can turn into balls to get across rivers, and they can do all these amazing stress things. So since our shoes do a lot of that for our daily experience as well, we put together this pair of shoes that are based upon those fire ants. And what does it mean to have the fire ants in your picture? And it's something interesting if you think about how Google is looking at our shoes every time we open up maps and taking that picture, because usually they look at the street. But what if Google were to look at the shoe and tell us about how we're moving, because it can see how fast we're getting places, how we're moving, the accelerometers can tell Google what's going on there. But we could tell, like, today I'm a fire ant and I want to move really quickly through the city. And so we give some sort of indication, whether we're wearing high heels or sneakers, or the shoes we're wearing, as to how we want to move as well.
And also they're a swarm community or swarm intelligence, what's happening there, how we move, in what numbers do we move, in which direction do we move as masses, so to say. And what you see here is laser cut on a leather which hasn't been treated, and that's really an interesting way of approaching how we can visualize certain things in a really detailed way on different materials as well. So
yeah, we had a lot of good material explorations as well with the laser cutting and the 3D printing. Christine, you want to add something?
No.
Okay,
I was just.
So Nika, what do you think about how the companies who are already taking pictures see our shoes, and what should we be showing them?
Well, the first fun thing for me is that the Camila that you're talking about, I have a class with in 2 hours right after this. So
she's a cool person.
Quite funny. I actually didn't know that they take those pictures. I also doubt whether this is if this might not give legal issues, because I don't, but probably you give consent to that in the whole list of conditions, probably.
On page 23.
Yeah. Well, I will one statement that I will make here, which is something that really stood by me over many years. In 2014, we gave a conference about health technology and footwear, and there was somebody who was involved in the legal aspect of health technology. So saying, what can you claim as a shoe company? What can you not claim when it comes to health, for instance? And he was showing an example of how important it is to keep data private, where he said there's a certain point in your life when you age, where you suddenly, your walking becomes less stable and slower. And they know from research that life insurance companies have done, that from that moment onwards, you have about 4 years more to live. So that shows how sensitive the data, for instance, about walking can be. It's something that we normally don't realize, right? So that kind of hit home with me. It's like, okay, normally you could think like, okay, why can somebody not know how I'm walking? We also have ethnic profiling. I think Troy and I talked about that before, that based on your gait, people can, Satellites could analyze your ethnicity, which is indeed something that they actively do in the Uyghur region in China. So I do think when we think about these concepts, that's my first comment, when we think about any of these concepts and they're about gathering data about how you walk, where you walk to, my first concern is always, is it necessary? How does it help us? And how does that compare to us giving away information that could also be used in ways that you might not be so happy about? So on the one hand, it could be good to know, indeed, for Google Maps, they can average. So when they say you walk from A to B, will take you on average this much time. And of course, knowing that whether you have a very athletic young person that's doing the walk or an elderly person that's doing the walk, that's of course a difference. So that could be interesting. Of course, you can also always think, would they need the shoes to know that? Or is there another way that they could know that? So
That's one of the things I find really interesting is that they already do it and they already know which shoes we're wearing. They know how we're moving because when the app is open, the device is communicating back. So they know how we move in each pair of the shoes we own. And it's what we were really looking at this workshop is how do we make that more explicit? How do they show us that they know which shoes we're wearing? And they're like, okay, you're in your business shoes today, so you're obviously in dress shoes.
Yeah.
And that means you can't walk as far, but you still need to get your 5,500 steps in today. So
what I like about
how do they show us that they actually know this and that they are using it, and how they, so that we can be conscious of it?
One very obvious one that there's really a need for, especially for women, and especially with Camila also being a female designer, the fireflies remind me, of course, of light, getting more light, of course. So, and you talked about lampposts, for instance, from Philips. So I could imagine lots of women walking on the street late at night that they would rather that, so that if a lamppost knows that a person, better yet, a female alone, for instance, is in that street, that the lights will go on brighter, stuff like that. Or just for anybody, when you walk somewhere, it could also save a lot of energy, where you could go like, okay, normally might not, if it's not a street that has a lot of traffic, you might not need a lot of light intensity from the poles at night. But say that somebody walks past that, you could get that little bit of extra light. Those are things that I could imagine, or how can we work on safety? And then indeed, it would make sense that this is, for instance, in the shoes. Otherwise, it would require you to have a phone widget. Of course, most people do, but for sure, everybody's wearing shoes. I mean, the chance that people are wearing shoes is still bigger than the chance that they have a smartphone on them. So those are things that I could really imagine. Was that a thought?
Yeah, that's a really good thought. So one of the NFT artists who joined us, Max, was thinking about sound and that whole idea of like if you're walking late at night and you're a woman and the light's getting brighter so that they tone down so they're not keeping the people awake there, but if somebody walks there. But we were looking at like the sounds that people make when they're clacking or when they're wearing high heels or things. And Max had this great idea about timber and how the sounds they make. So we actually 3D printed a couple of pieces that are made to make a very specific noise.
Yeah.
So we clapped when they hit them against something. Oops. We get this really unique sound. I just dropped the mouse.
Getting it up.
Sorry. But what was really fun about this is that we had Max, the first thing he thought of was making an NFT with this. So he's making an NFT, we recorded the noise very specifically, and he's making an NFT of the noise.
Yeah.
And that could be really interesting if we start to think about, we live in these cities, if they're gonna have sound recording all around us, so they already have the video recordings of us, but if they start to record the noise as well, can we make a sound that's very specific just to us? Yeah. So that we can go back and ask, I can prove that I am the owner of this NFT. So show me everything you know about where I was because of the sound I was making. So your NFT becomes your proof of ownership that I am that noise.
Yeah.
And so if we can think about data and data commons, we start to be able to say I can access that data because I own the NFT, which is the noise of these shoes. And we can make different.
I would think almost the opposite way, where you would be able to download somebody else's sound. So indeed to mask that it's you. I've worked in the past a lot with police on forensic research because, of course, footprints, shoe prints especially are important evidence in crime. So I'm always thinking when I hear these things, you have a fun part to it. So I don't know if this weekend there was a message that a Dutch company called Voicy got a huge investment from Spotify and a bunch of other companies because they are indeed allowing people to get money. So basically spread little sound bites, little audio files, little samples. And that would of course be great for that. It's called Voicy. So you would indeed be able to make a Voicy with this clackety sound. I also like that. I do tap dancing. So I can imagine making tap dancing here in Barcelona. So I can imagine that this could be interesting for that. On the other hand, of course, whenever I think of recording where I've been and recording data about where I've been and when I've been there, that's surveillance. And I keep running into the fact that I would like to see a bit more research about the benefits of that versus the disadvantages of that. So you could, in that sense, you could also think in another way, if you have a certain sound, that you could sound differently. So, but could you indeed wear sneakers and sound like you wear high heels or stuff, or better yet, vice versa? I think a lot of people, complaining about noise, for instance, noise pollution also in streets. Yeah, indeed, high heels do make a lot of noise, but then that's not so much solved by a censoring issue. That's of course more a material issue that you can kind of like make those sounds softer. But I like the idea of gathering sounds in the city with your shoes, because your shoes have a way of gathering very different sound than up where you are with your ears. So I know from Billie Eilish's brother once gave a talk about how he was producing her music, and that one time in Berlin they loved the sound that the traffic lights were making when it goes from red to green, so that blind people know when it's a green light, and that he recorded that sound to use it in one of her tracks, and that actually everybody thought, oh, it's this cool drum beat, and he never knew that this was actually the Berlin traffic light. So so this is where I could imagine indeed that it could be very interesting to make like or even have routes that people can follow to gather certain sounds, if that's what they want. Or then maybe the same as with the traffic lights, also the other way around, that if there's certain things that make a noise, because that's just a functional noise, that it could the activity could maybe stop for a bit if somebody approaches. I mean, we have now people redecorating the building next to us during the week, and it's a super loud noise, and it would be pretty good to know if there's like an X amount of people approaching, that you could say, oh, okay, now you have to stop or wait or something like that.
Or maybe there's a way to cover something, so you have a camouflage. So if you don't want to make a noise and you don't want to be tracked and traced, that you can disappear.
Disappear or that it could be a counter noise. So that a sound. So I always think of these Japanese toilets that make a flushing sound when you already go in them, so that nobody can hear you make any sounds. The first time I heard that, you're all confused. You're like, huh, but I'm not flushing, and then you hear flushing, but that's just the function of the toilet. So you could white noise, counter sound. So
what do you think about the sound NFT, Christina?
I think it's a great idea, because sound is completely overlooked NFT, I think, and there's a lot of scope there. So I think I know music has been doing NFTs and videos with music or videos with sound, but just sound, I haven't seen many or any really. Yeah. So
we looked, yeah.
But if anybody knows anything, please
put it in
the chat. So maybe we will be one of the first ones to do a sound NFT with Max.
Again, it could be interesting to have legal people. I mean, I don't mean to sound boring, but I know Troy also knows from his PhD how you always run into legal things. Things are not covered yet by any legal, because of course, if you record, say that you randomly record sounds from the street, those are not sounds that you necessarily produce. It's sounds from other things. Can you then legally claim that as yours? So that will, of course, be an interesting.
It's a legal minefield, definitely.
Yeah,
No, I think
Everything else
that's
with
up for the
NFTs.
challenge. I think NFTs, that's just in the definition of, yeah, it's a legal minefield. But,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
That's where I'm always, really, why I like doing these speculative projects and
Yes.
trying to figure this out. Is I watch companies already using this and doing this, and yet nobody knows that these companies are doing this. I mean, the beam shaping microphones that we have in our Alexas, whisper to your Alexa, she will still respond. It tells you how well these things work. And now that they're running AI on audio, they can really extract a lot of data. And so trying to make that explicit so people even know that, when you're making any noise walking down the street, they know where you're at. They don't have to see you, they can hear you.
yeah.
And then if they correlate it to who you are that they see you, things get really crazy.
Yeah, I think that's
So
why.
how do we find artistic ways to do that?
Yeah, and I think that by itself, sharing that knowledge, I think, or the raising the awareness about that, I think that we're gonna have a big impact anyway. So
Yeah.
that by itself.
A bit like the Google Feed scenario
Yes.
that we
Yes.
didn't know, that
Yes.
Troy enlightened us on.
Yes.
So,
They take a picture every time you open and close maps.
Yes.
So
But where did they save the picture and what happens with it?
they don't let us know. It was one of those, we take a picture. They said they were doing it for surface of roads, but I just started taking pictures of every time I opened Google Maps and started to notice, hey, my shoes are in every one of those pictures. So if they know what surface I'm walking on and what shoes I'm wearing, they get a good idea of how I'm traveling in those specific shoes.
what you're doing, what the weather is like, and
Whether or not they're using that yet, I don't know. But it would be really interesting to see if we agreed to it, what they would do with that data, or what we as shoe designers could do with that data if they would share that back with us as well.
Yeah.
Yes.
So then we talked about camouflaging the shoe as well.
Yeah.
Yes.
Kind of doing a filter over the shoe, so you would kind of
Yeah. That's
hide.
with all these things something I really can imagine, that because then if you want to give people the choice whether they are okay with this or not, that you indeed would have things that scramble the sound, so that you don't want to be able to, you can't be heard, that camouflage your shoes so that you can't be seen, so that you have materials already that reflect in such a way that a camera cannot take a picture of it, or it will disappear in the picture, or just shown as a light flash, or so those are things that I could also easily imagine that people want, and also in the future would be necessary to legally establish ownership of those.
I didn't bring it here, but I'm gonna go grab it because it's over here in our little exhibition space. Sorry, I should have grabbed it before we started.
Again, if you're in Munich, come by. We're here till 4 o'clock in that store, the pop-up store at the Rindermarkt. We have a display of all the prototypes that we created. Troy brought some amazing material along with him as well. We're gonna photograph everything. Everything will be on social, on Instagram, and if you look at responsive fashion, we're gonna post it all there and repost it. But
so in terms of like visual jamming, we were looking at uppers. This is a highly glitter piece of leather. And we did that trick where you put it up with the Lycra on the back, so that the upper would be making lots of light, lots of shiny. As cameras look at it, it looks like the Formica in the streets in New York City. So we were all about like matching textures and making it just look like another street texture. So the algorithms wouldn't see your foot per se; they'd just see a texture that looked like the ground.
Yeah.
Sure. And so, yeah, we were really trying to figure out what does that camouflage look like, and what is that, and using a leather that's kind of kitschy, but when you start to do it with these kind of repeating patterns, you get these really interesting folds and craquelatures that I'm pretty sure would confuse any vision-based AI system a little bit.
and it looks cool. I would love to wear shoes like that.
We were trying to make some sandals with it.
Yes, we're gonna keep
We had
it going.
more ideas than we had time to manufacture them. So
As always.
yeah.
Yes.
So the other fun part of that was working on cadence. These are a little hard to see, but we were making little pieces. We scanned up somebody's foot who's obviously a size 36 and not a size 42.
In front of a bike.
There we go. Yeah. So what it would allow us to do is, by changing the individual heights of the cones here, we would change how people walk.
Yeah.
So something like an insole that on the days you didn't want to be identified, you kind of like a PERDA system, you could pick a different insole and it would change your gait just enough that it would throw off all the tracking systems, or make you look like somebody else. And that's where I think it gets to be really interesting. As we look at the systems that watch us bob and see how we walk, finding ways of making us look like other people, I think is fascinating.
Yeah, I think people don't realize how necessary, unfortunately, that is. But indeed, if you have such elaborate, I've been right before COVID in a bunch of conferences in China, which were about artificial intelligence, optical recognition, stuff like that. And it's just quite horrible, to be honest, how much they can do and are doing with it. So because indeed, Uyghur people, for instance, are fully monitored by their walk. So you can look it up. It's a software called Watrix, W-A-T-R-I-X, and they are just open about it. This is a software that measures your gait, and so that you can be uniquely identifiable by the way you walk. Now, of course, as soon as you try to change something drastically about your walk, then you also stand out because you're not looking for like the Ministry of Funny Walks, right? It's not like that type of thing, but indeed doing something subtle that would change your walk just enough without it being conspicuous. And there's also indeed research going on, for instance, with how can I maybe by getting a different insole, make me walk in a way that would make the system think I'm a different ethnicity. So those are actually things that we might unfortunately need, because those are also things that are now going to be used in Ukraine. It's recognizing people in many different ways, and of course started with facial recognition, but there are much easier ways around that. Of course, as soon as you wear a mask, scarf, whatever, okay, it gets better and better, but there's more ways that you can obstruct that. But your walk is much more difficult to mask and change. So indeed, it would have to be very subtle. But that is actually something that we do, that unfortunately in certain areas where that is necessary, where you would want to use that.
Cool.
Cool. Yes.
Let me see here. And then, yeah, the last thing we did is jumped into some deep virtual shoes. And Christina really led the effort here. She did some pretty amazing. There were many of us all in the Oculus at the same time designing on the same shoes. We made little 3D printouts of them, and
nice.
you could tell we got pretty wild. And we were looking at virtual feathers, and we had. I believe this is your shoe.
Yes,
It was quite a lot of fun.
The churros.
Do you want to tell them about
It's
that?
a churros.
Super nice. Oh, that's cool.
For you in Spain,
Yeah.
the churros juice.
Oh,
So
nice.
you can power coat them in icing sugar or powdered sugar. And it's also my first design, my first shoe I designed ever.
First shoe design, yay.
I did it in VR, which was really fun. So I want to go back to that and continue doing that. We just have some.
Yeah, 1 second. We've got some virtual images to show you here.
Yes.
So interesting. There we go.
So basically what we did is we all, advertising program, but we all used a Quest headset. So you've got a standalone headset like this, which has the software on it, Gravity Sketch, which is free. You create a collaborative room, and then you go in and create in virtual, you create whatever you want. So we created some shoes, like, can you, is that sharing? Yeah.
Yeah, that's sharing. You can see the shoes, right?
You can see the shoes?
Oh, yes, yeah.
Yeah, she was looking at the shoes. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically what we did is we LiDAR scanned the lab we were working in. On the left, you see the 3D printers actually. And then we added the virtually created shoes into the WebXR platform called Frame. And anybody can go in and create a platform like that. You just go in and add your 3D models.
And we'll share a link to that.
We will share a link to that, and also we're looking at the option to create a POAP of that. So again, we're not only going to create an NFT of a sound of the shoe, we're also going to create that access gate to this VR space.
Christina, can you describe what a POAP is?
Yes,
what was it again? It's a proof of attendance protocol. So basically, it's a bragging right. So you could show that you've been there and you've got a digital proof of that. So usually it's used for events. So now it's been used for anything really. You've been to a football game, you've been to an event, you
Workshop
know,
on
a
shoemaking.
workshop, a concert, or something like that. So yeah, so that's what we're going to create with this, and then and that's when we share the link.
Yes, everything will be updated soon, the next couple of days.
Yeah, and it was really, as you can see in the background there, the background that we have here was also moved to that virtual space so that we could jump into the virtual space and look at the entire map of our concept mapping, and then actually sit there and try to design shoes together with that concept mapping in the space. And having that virtual workroom that was identical to the space that we were working in really lends something to that blending of the digital and the physical
Yes.
in a really deep way. So you can really start to understand what you're prototyping by hand and what you're prototyping in virtual is pretty interesting.
And the good thing is all these softwares are, I mean, obviously you have to buy the headset, but all the softwares are free. They're not really open source, but they are free and accessible, which is really important for us.
Yes,
That
and
it stays accessible.
it's really beautiful to really give people access to that and to really go in and test it out. And I think that's going to be a really big change.
And
Yeah.
experiment and just play with it. Where can it go?
How do we democratize shoe design in the metaverse? I mean,
Yes.
that gets to be something really
The
interesting.
shoeyverse.
The shoeyverse. We were talking about the shoeyverse the last 2 days. The shoeverse. How do we get into these spaces where people who want to design their own shoes can? And not everybody's going to want to, but one of your friends will probably want to do it, and they can make shoes for you. Since we don't have to look at the means of production there, we can really spread them. So I think what we came up with is that we need new tools as well. Gravity Sketch is great, but there's certain elements and ideas of shoes that will need to be shared. And so creating that space that shares that knowledge about shoes and what it means to have virtual shoes that don't actually have to walk on anything.
Yeah, and no physical laws apply, obviously.
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
You can co-create it with someone else. Either
in
someone
a different part of the world.
Yes. So it can be someone from East Africa, someone from West Africa, it could be someone from, it's really no limits. You just need a bit of hardware and, access to the internet.
Yeah. No, we see this already happening a lot. I mean, we use this also a lot. We also use this in training. Do have a remark on the NFT. I know it's a market that really needs to mature still. Now, what I would like to see also with things like this, and what I think is a great opportunity if you're talking about mobility and data, etc., is to add different layers of service to your NFT. What I dislike at this moment, and is also actually causing problems, is the fact that people really still think very traditionally when it comes to an NFT, like what do people get? So you buy the digital file, what do you get for that? And technically, most people still make the mistake, I think, of thinking that you want a physical representation of that thing. So I now get literally approached every day. I have another meeting on Monday again with people making the most outrageous NFT shoes who are then saying, I want you to help me produce that. Now, for somebody like me, who is very dedicated to producing things in a way that is circular, local, automated to help the industry forward, this is literally a nightmare. I now see designs being made that are the most horribly polluting, glued together, welded, honestly, crap, I have no other word for it, that you cannot wear, that you will not wear for a long time. And I'm definitely not against digital shoes. I think it's fantastic. I indeed think that we should investigate much more what that means for us. So if you have that NFT, so say you indeed have a certain, an NFT is like a membership to me. It's like a membership into something. But what that something is, I feel that we're now lacking discussion on defining what that is.
Yes.
Because especially in the city, I mean, I remember ages ago when I was working for Timberland that I wanted to do something similar like this that give you access to events, or the co-op that Joanna described. We had to do it much more simple then, that you, for instance, you had those wristbands, of course, that you get when you go to a concert, and then we made a boot that you could put the wristbands in as like a fastening. with those barcodes at that time, you would then get access, right? Backstage access, or like small concert, like different information about the artist, whatever. You could think of a lot of different things. And that's what I would love to see, especially in a city, indeed, knowing what's going on. So for instance, where you guys are now in this space, how do people know that you're there? Say that it could be the same as here in Barcelona. We have BSing, but I know you have this everywhere in the world. So the public bicycle system, for instance, and you can only get that if you are an official resident of the city. I could not rent one of those bikes or borrow one of the bikes until I was a resident. Now, I would like that residency, that club membership, indeed, to come with privileges like, hey, my shoes or my phone or whatever, or combinations of those. Say I'm walking, 2 weeks ago, we had here open house of Fablano, and I didn't know that it was there. So I kind of ran into it by accident because I walked on the weekend to the office to teach a class. But I was like, oh, would have been nice to know that I walk here and they say, hey, by the way, do you know this today is Fablano? And frankly, with your level of whatever NFT membership or something, you have special access today to a presentation of blah or something like this. Or that's where I really think the interaction can be. And that's why do you want this then in your shoes? And I think that's also for these projects important to keep in mind, is that further down the line, as we're making cities much smarter, the general plan is to make, of course, the communication technology in the street. And that's why your feet will be closest to that. So that's why a lot of the communication will go literally down that way. And then you need the least amount of radiation for the communication that goes straight through the street. That's also how they're planning for self-driving cars. Then it's basically the street drives you. So it's a different way of thinking, and that's where we have a lot of opportunities, I think, in terms of mobility, in terms where are you now, what can be done right there. Or indeed, the other day I went home and it turned out that there was some type of riot going on. I guess people were protesting and riot police came, and I just came with my 2 dogs like, oops, around the corner. I did not ask for this. Did not know about that. So this would have been great had I turned out when I walk out my front door, I can turn left or right, either way. I need to make a U-turn towards my house. Would have been nice if my shoes would have warned me, hey, Nico, today better turn right because left is riot police. So, and there's a lot of, we are all the happy people that live in maybe pretty safe. I know that Munich is also very, in my memory, very clean and relatively safe city. And we are happy to have all that, but of course, many people in the world don't have that, and actually have even a much higher need of them getting this type of information to keep them safe. So it goes from keeping you safe to getting you to the places that you want to go and seeing things. We did a street art tour the other day through Barcelona, and it would be great if I would be notified, or I would be able on my way home to take the route that goes along the latest street art exhibition. Now I run into it by accident, but I would love to be able to leave and say, okay, with Google Maps, maybe, do I want to go fast? Do I want to go artsy? Do I want to go past the best bars? Do I want to know what are the things, what is my route, and that my shoes would take me there. I also still like the idea of, what you can do, you can have indeed the shoes do the navigation, subtle pulses that tell you to walk left or right, so that you don't need to even look at your phone. You can listen to music and have the shoes directly to where you need to go in very subtle ways, tactile ways, which would also work for people that are visually impaired. So there's a lot of things that we can do here. And I think in general, it's more about figuring out where the real benefits are to people, and then as opposed to where there's surveillance that we might not want. And then when we then connect that to metaverse, then it gives even more opportunities. But then it's indeed purely for digital shoes.
I think there's a deep relationship between aesthetics and style there too.
Yeah.
The shoes that we choose each day communicate kind of what we're in the mood for.
Yeah.
And figuring out some of that, that we sometimes we can say, I want to optimize for going past the bars. But it also can know if I'm wearing my cool shoes and it's, the time of night it is, that, the bars are still open for 2 hours. Maybe if it deviates me just a little bit, that it'll, I'm already pre-indicating by the style of what I have on.
Yes.
Yeah, well, you could also have your shoes, of course, take pictures of the surroundings. One of the things that we're experimenting with at this moment is design through AI that is text to image. So you have all these new apps now that are text to image. So you basically type a text and then the AI creates a certain image. You can also upload pictures into that and type text. So it could be a common, you could have the data that you gather. Many people don't realize that could also in turn create a visual that could maybe work for the sound.
Yeah.
Journey, or you could create a poem with your, walking dogs.
Also poetry. I mean, there's so many things that you could create generatively and it will still be a unique footprint literally to everybody, because it's also about where you're going and where you've been. So, and that could be actually very interesting also, even in understanding for future design what people will like, because it's often, I mean, creative people like ourselves often kind of assume that people would like to design shoes themselves. Average consumer, in my experience, does not like to design shoes themselves or anything for that matter.
Do this.
No.
What they would, I always give the example, right? So with the popularity of Yeezy in my business in footwear, I always ask brands that come to me for customization and all that. I was like, okay, would you prefer that you can customize your Yeezy, or would you prefer that Kanye designs a personal Yeezy for you? Most people choose easily the latter option. So, and that is possible by basically Kanye-fying in an algorithm, of course, because he has quite clear aesthetic rules of what he does in terms of color usage, proportion, and you could mathematically turn that into like a series of algorithms where you could then have that
The yay algorithm.
oh yay, but it's, yeah, I'm sure the man will want to have an NFT of that, but it's but to help people, because usually people, they're not, the average consumer is not a designer, but when they are confronted with a not unlimited but small choice of options, because they don't want to be smacked with a million choices, but small choices of options, then they are able to distinguish, like intuitively, this is me. This is more what I would like. And they're not so much able to really voice those preferences. That's why I always kind of smile about lots of students coming with beautiful questionnaires to try and figure out people's aesthetic preference. I was like, forget it, because even in the wording, do you like modern? Do you like classic? Yeah, what one person thinks is classic, the other person thinks is modern. You really have to work with visuals, and it's a much more intuitive language. And then, but then when people see something that was indeed generated with things that have their preference, then they do intuitively often recognize, yes, I like this, without necessarily even knowing, oh yeah, this is made for me. It doesn't have to be literal, like, oh, well, here's a sneaker with all the pictures of what you did this week. No, I mean, it's a much more subtle aesthetic language that could resonate with people, and that's really something interesting from the data. And I personally, I mean, Google would be nuts not to use the data. I do assume that they use the data of those pictures, and many things that you could think of that they use it for. But it would also be helpful. I mean, these are the more innocent things, I think, when it comes to aesthetics and our aesthetic preferences and things that we like to see and people that we surround ourselves with. Because say you go to a bar and you're with your friends, it could, and it has camera options or whatever, it could record like what are the shoes of the people that you are with, and kind of who is your crowd, who are your peers, who are, so it could really extrapolate a lot of these data and try to turn that into preferences that you have in terms of where you go, the sound, the places you go, the people you meet. Those do determine often
Classic Simmel 1954. We want to look like 3 of our friends and look different than 5 of our friends. Why can't the algorithm help us calculate that out? You know, which of your 3 friends do you look like and do you like to look like? Yes. And which one of your 5 friends do you not want to look like?
No, because of course it doesn't mean that the people that you meet are the people that you look like, but this is what you could do through machine learning, or it may be presenting you with options, and then this is often how we do it now. You would get presented with, say, 2-3 options, this yes, this no, and from that it learns what your aesthetic preferences are.
Well, but another part of that, and we worked on it a little bit this week, was this idea that the explicit data showing you where it's coming from. I want to have the same 12 shoes on the screen that I get when I go to Adidas or Nike, but I'd really love to see where are they gathering the data from. This one's a combination of my personal shoe data from Google and Facebook, and this is what it looks like. And if I click on one of those icons, it kind of shows me the images or the data that it used to generate that. And I think that explainable AI really brings something to that table.
Yeah, and then you press the button and say, I want this for everyday life, going from A to B. You press the button and then your shoe.
Well, that is actually possible. That was what I was doing in Alicante the past days. Let me get something then from my side to show you guys. Hold on a minute.
Sure. Yeah, how do we bring that data together, and what data do we bring together, I think is the real question.
Yeah, and data for impact or with impact.
Data ownership.
Yeah.
So one of the things we are looking at is indeed low scale production, fully automated, etc. And I really want to be able to see the base shoe as a framework that I can keep changing. But indeed so this was a test of a printer that you just put a full pair of shoes in, and it can print fully over the shoe, over the sole, wherever you prefer. It has a camera in there. You position exactly where you want the graphic to be. That could also be automated. Now, what we just talked about when it comes to aesthetics, if indeed you could occasionally have like an update of that graphic, I'm looking into systems where this could also come off. Either you can wash it off, or it could be a layer that you could take off, where you indeed would not have to change your shoe all the time. You would have that shoe, but you can indeed have aesthetics like this generated, whether this is a graphic or a color combination, or it could, I could also use the machine to make the shoe in one color or a gradient of colors or whatever. So we're now researching how to do this in a way that you could, for instance, also again, take it off. That's not super difficult because we have coatings already that we could put on a shoe that you could take off. And if you print on top of that, you could say, well, every so many, you could have, indeed, we're talking about NFTs, for instance. If you say that I'm a big street art fan, so say that I am a fan, part of a street art collective, or of the organization that arranges the street art here, because here in Barcelona, you have like an organization that kind of commissions artists to do on the legal wall. So you have a number of legal walls where they can do art, where I could, as soon as there's new artwork coming, that I get notified through my membership through NFT, and I'm able to also then get that shoe done, but not in a way that if I don't like that shoe anymore, that I have to throw the shoe away. This is just an aesthetic layer. So we're thinking about our products in terms of a structural layer, so the comfort of the shoe, the safety, the support that you get from it, etc., and the aesthetic layer, and how can we separate the two? Because that would really, also in production, because that would really help us to create shoes with much more longevity. I would rather not, same as with the car, if you have a flat tire on the car, you don't throw the car away. If we want to have a shoe in a different color, we now throw the shoe away. So what if we could see it as car design, and you keep that base structure and silhouette that is your starting point. And then these types of things, and whether this is a 2D printing option, you also have 3D printing options, of course, that you could do around it. But what if we start thinking this way? Then the data, aesthetic data, also gathered from where you go, could be translated to things like this personal to you.
You could also do a digital layer, obviously.
Yes.
Yeah, the digital overlays,
yeah. So have the base and then.
Yeah, because you can key in on any one of those patterns.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
Well, also for the design, and need to have a digital base for people who want to, for instance, work in Gravity Sketch or different apps. I do think that for the average consumer, when it comes to the creating things in the metaverse for them, of course, that would have to be simplified, because the Gravity Sketch is fantastic software for designers, but it's not so much for people that want to quickly do something like that. Yeah. But then indeed, you could have that done digitally, and then should you want to have that also as a physical representation, then you can have that done without necessarily having to make something that is really ephemeral and would be thrown away fairly quickly, so that you say, okay, there's only this one layer that I can keep changing. And of course, there have been initiatives to try and do that with like LEDs and OLED screens and whatever in shoes, but it's going to be very fragile and difficult to do and energy consuming, where it might not be necessary to consume all that energy. You know, there's also things that require electricity where you're like, really?
Another
Do
bunch of
we have-
electronics we'll never recycle, yeah.
yeah, do we have to have electricity for all of that? So, you know, is that necessary? So, but here I can really imagine that if we go that route, and indeed, I'm convinced, and I know, I'm sure you guys are too, that the way we design stuff will change and also has to change to make it also for sustainability aspect that you want to keep something longer, it's more personal to you. It's just that we need to mature in these things rather than giving somebody a shoe and now you can click that what color do you want this part, what color do you want that part, much more, you know, in
We were all talking about how we've all done at least one of those systems and how we've all regretted it.
Failed.
Well, this is interesting because we once indeed did research into that. It was small scale research, but it was indeed all with people that had bought custom shoes, whether it's my Adidas or Nike ID and those like that. And then it was indeed a lot of design students that had done that. But then when you asked, have you worn them a lot? No. Have you done it again? Were you a repeat buyer? Have you done it more than once? No.
Have you enjoyed the process?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, it's interesting because it's like a kid's coloring book, and then you since you have the incentive to make a different choice from part to part, you are inclined to do that. But then in the end, you realize that that's not how you normally design shoes, and that's why shoes don't have 20 colors in one shoe usually, because indeed it does look like a clown shoe. So it's so when people do get it, they're like, yeah, right. But this is where this software and where this data gathering can really help. So whether it comes from gathering, you can bring all these data streams, it might be a nice way to round it up, all these data streams together where indeed you have the surface element. So what types of surfaces do you walk on? What does that mean for your soul? You know, what type of comfort is that? How hard is that? What type of insole might you then need? What types of materials are interesting for you? I mean, I live in Barcelona now. Indeed, many of my shoes that I had in the Netherlands, I don't wear, way too warm. So because you want to have much more airy fabric. So that's already those would be the data for the like physical framework that provides you comfort and support and literally provides you the mobility. And then you could have literally other layer or layers of data that are providing you the aesthetics of your shoe. Speaking of sound, it could provide you the intensity of sound. So when we're talking about sound, so measuring that you are walking in a noisy area or that you are walking on a surface that will make you create a lot of noise, it might be that you want to turn your music up a little bit and that it could happen automatically, stuff like that. So to really, that's where we can think about the different functions of all those different layers of data and how they could influence how your shoe behaves. And if we can then connect that to sustainable manufacturing options, then we're going places. I think.
Great, fantastic. Well, are there maybe any questions?
Yeah, I don't know. I look forward to seeing the embroidery of the tablecloth. It's super fun.
Yes. It's going to be fun to.
And yeah, we have a video system, so we can just do it over it. But yes, I'm going to have to get an intern for a semester to kick this out.
What are you guys doing now? So what are your plans on your side with what you've done now with this project? What are there next steps or next things that you want to do, or?
Yeah, I think we really have to keep looking at the situated nature of data and what does it mean, you know, because the situated aspect of what it means to be in Munich versus what it means to be in Barcelona or Amsterdam changes the design considerations that the AI needs to help us deal with drastically and deeply. And I think it's what's really interesting about local cultures, local temperatures, those things that we find that are unique to each city, the subtle fashion differences that we find between cities and how people define even the styles around them. It becomes complicated, but if there's anything that AI and machine learning is good at doing, it's dealing with complicated data.
Yeah. Yeah, it could be great also to have the data and communicate it back to people. So I'm in a group for women who travel a lot, so who exchange tips and whatever. There's always a lot of questions like, I'm going here or there. What are good shoes to wear? I remember going to Portugal for something official, wearing high heels. Indeed, it's all cobblestone. You're going to break your neck. So you would much rather, if you've never been there, would have known, oh, where's the shoe profile for this? It might be even that you could have a shoe profile, ideal shoe profile for this
Yeah.
city.
Google knows this. They've been taking pictures of the ground the whole time. Why aren't they
Should
sharing
have
it
their
with us?
profiles like
Yeah.
we're
They
trainers
haven't,
here.
they haven't sold shoes yet, right?
No.
Yeah. Or if you're wearing high heels, where can you go in the city? Like the overlay map of the easy places to get to in high heels. So you can find the easiest route to travel
To
in. So you
travel
can
to
go.
there. Yeah, it's absolutely true. So those are indeed really pragmatic daily things that I used to work in a shoe store when I was just starting my career, which was next to Dam Square. We made a good business indeed of repairing heels because Dam Square, as you might know, is also in Amsterdam, is also all cobblestones. People could get stuck with the heels and the leather would be pushed up and oh gosh. So yeah, we would do great selling heel protectors and stuff like that because yeah, it's just good to know for people. And it sounds like something so, you know, superficial or uninteresting, but it's good to know, especially for travel. You don't want to bring a gazillion pair of shoes. What can you, it's knowing the culture, and it's knowing the area. I mean, I'm always still surprised that Barcelona is a very casual city, so it's very rare that you would see people wear suits or anything like that. So even for business meetings that you would know, okay, it's warm and it's casual, so I can easily bring that pair of canvas sneakers and I can wear that to my meeting. I don't have to be afraid that I will look silly, as opposed to whatever, say that you would have to go to an office in London where you would probably be expected to wear more formal attire in certain areas, or in Asia, for instance, Singapore, where you would be more formal. So it's helpful, I think, to have to understand those types of things.
Christina, what shoes should I wear to an office in London?
Well, I wear trainers everywhere, so I'm probably the wrong one. But I've got problematic feet, so it's not an excuse. But I think one thing about problematic feet is as well that that's another data point that could maybe be included in that Google shoe thing, where I can't walk on uneven ground, for example, for a long time. So that could be incorporated.
Could be
Stuff
great.
with
Oh yeah.
abilities or accessibility issues.
Yeah.
You could have inside Google, hopefully in the future, a preferred walking pattern, like where you're like, this is my preferred way of walking, and whether with or without limitations, so that it's easy to calculate the best route for you, or for you to know ahead of time whether this, say that indeed you want to go to an event and it's taking place in a certain area where you don't know what that is, that you are able to understand, okay, this part yes, this part no, and here I'll do fine. I think of, for instance, Salone del Mobile in Milan, which is throughout the city in many different areas, and certain areas are much more comfortable to walk in for sure than certain other areas, etc. So it could be great to know these things. So I definitely think that could be helpful, and in turn also as data for designers to understand, if you are designing for certain regions, what are ideal materials and ideal functionalities for those shoes. At this moment, it would be very logical to have that data, and at this moment there's no such availability. But now we know where to go, we know who has it.
Yeah, or how to generate it.
How to generate, but how to get it?
Yeah, this is where we have to convince them it's in everybody's best interest, and I think that's why we were doing speculative projects like this, that because it says we know you have this data. Here's what we would do with it if you'd only give us access to it, and convincing them that this is a good thing to share, and there's a commons there, especially for designers. That we unfortunately have mega monolithic shoe companies that make the same shoes for the entire planet, but that could really change, and localism. Distributed data leads to localism because we can design for specific situations.
Right, you can do that because you could make this. I mean, this is one of those examples of super simple sneaker, basic sneaker, but you could really change the properties of this shoe completely, make it look the same visually, but could really change the properties because I have a different compound for the sole, and the knit that I have here now on the top could have very different properties, from being very open to being very stiff. And based upon what we are making this object for, That could be data that informs, especially if we're looking towards the local for local concept that we're also looking for. So you have local production hubs that produce for the area, so that country or the neighboring countries. It already at least narrows down generally the area. And it stimulates, and that literally stimulates people to buy locally, because then they would get an ideal shoe for their, because if I would then say I'm going to buy the one, now I have a bit of an extreme sneaker taste, so I still buy a lot from China because they have my taste. So
Well, and that's something really interesting as well, and I think we touched on it a little bit. Climate change is changing, what shoes you need in what areas. We're seeing it get hotter in places and cooler shoes, and yet the culture and the cultural aspects of style still require a shoe that's not breathable, a shoe that's, a traditional shoe in London is really hot these days and incredibly uncomfortable in many senses because of the climate change that's happening. So how do we build that into our model as well as our AIs are trying to deal with it? I mean, it is how many degrees here in Munich today?
Over 30, and it's a heat wave in southern Spain right now, as you probably know. You experience it, and there's more floods. I mean, you talked about snow
in the
Wyoming,
States right now,
and hurricanes or tornadoes. It's
in places where there shouldn't be tornadoes.
Yes. So there's this really different requirements that are necessary.
No, we will know, at least for the future, that we will have more abrupt weather changes. That's probably what for most people global warming really means, in daily effect. So that again would work with, I think there was a good remark now from Iskender that talking about different layers of data and coding, that you can indeed also, if we connect those different layers of data to different layers literally in shoemaking, where you could then indeed say, okay, now today my shoes are suited for indeed the tornado or cold weather or whatever, and now they are suited for the warmer day. So there's a lot that we can do there, because it's not, the weather patterns are not going to be like before, where you would be able to predict the season and go like, this whole season, this whole period of time, you will be cold, or this whole period of time, you're going to be warm. That's going to be changing much more quickly.
2 week drops. But having that editable shoe, that shoe that you can really change.
Yes.
And it's good to see you doing it. We see so many companies, especially in Sweden, developing some of this chemical knowledge. So that's going to be really fun and exciting. Also, just the whole AI-driven art scene, so that you can do your own AI NFT art on your shoes every day.
Yes.
I think turns into something really fun and wild.
And also from working and being in Ethiopia a few times, it's like, what is the global scale of that? Why? I mean, we collect the data, we have the data, but what is happening on a global scale? What kind of requirements are there? I mean, who's carrying the heavy goods? That's women in Ethiopia, and they're very often barefoot, and very 2 children.
Well, there the issue is, of course, people not having shoes. Another example, I don't know if you followed it in Germany, actually, Sneakerjagd. I don't know if you saw that. Sneakerjagd is a project by what is the big newspaper? It's from a company called Let's Flip. And what they did, they asked 11 German celebrities to give them their worn sneakers. They put a GPS tracker in those sneakers, and they would hand the sneakers into recycling systems, right? So from Nike Grind to the boxes that you have at Zara, the containers that you have on the street to collect worn textiles and footwear. And then they would measure through those, they would really track the GPS signals. And not only that, they would actually go to the places. So to see what is happening here. And really found the big issues that we in shoes already knew, but that really visualized and proved it now. And this might be the best mobility data project to date, I think, with shoes, that you could really see on the one hand, shoes that were still very wearable of a brand would all be smuggled into Eastern Europe and sold, because that's of course still a very valuable shoe. So that shows companies, hey, instead of trashing this stuff, this is still very valuable. But of course, most of the issues are with shoes being dumped in African countries, where they are also they're either sold for such a low price that their local industry gets no chance, but mostly they are straight dumped into landfill there. So we are
on the sea, in Ghana, it ends up first it ends up on a pile of dump, it ends up in the sea.
Exactly.
And
That's how that happens, and this really made that data visible. For you had an interactive map where you could follow what actually happened with those shoes. They really also, when it went to Africa, they spent the time to actually then fly. This was in Kenya, that they flew to Kenya to see what actually happened to those sneakers and to follow them straight down to the landfill. And then to use this to really slap people in the face with it. They proved that Nike was grinding up fully new shoes. So because that's what they saw happening in the facility, they were like, wait, there looks like they're grinding up new shoes. So they ended up buying a pair of Nike sneakers quite quickly to send them back the next day, like doesn't fit or whatever, with the GPS tracker. And we're then indeed able to track that pair straight to the grind facility. So even though these were brand new sneakers, and this made it to politics also in Germany because it's illegal in Europe to grind up new goods. So those are things also that then really have an actual impact, and that force companies also to do better. So this is another great example of how gathering data this way makes it so visible what is really happening. So that it forces people to face up to reality and go like, you can no longer hide this, because there's a reason why people are not allowed into recycling facilities. They were also not allowed into the facilities. They kind of almost had to break in and kind of undercover check this.
It's a interesting business.
It's a really interesting, shady, difficult business.
And it's been really interesting. Like I work with a few of these companies outside of Amsterdam, and it's this question of during COVID, all of their sorters couldn't come to work, so they just had too much building up, and they could do nothing but just ship it on.
Yeah. And people were getting rid of their stuff during the lockdown.
Yeah.
They were clearing their closet, and the quality is better than it used to be.
It could be great to have data that means through optical recognition. That's what they're doing now in the recycling facilities, to install optical recognition that could see whether the shoe is still wearable or not. This could already be something that is measured before the shoe is handed in, so that you as a consumer are offered very different options to hand your shoe in if it's still very wearable.
Yeah. One of the things that we had a lot of fun with in the workshop too is the 3D scanning. The fact that your iPads and your new iPhones finally have the LiDAR scanners on them. We're getting to the point we can scan a foot fairly easily, or you can at least get the sole of the shoe to come out there. And so how can companies build this into their ecosystem? Stop seeing it as consumers, that we stop thinking about the shoe at the point of sale, and like every 3 months you just give me a scan of your sole as the of your shoe sole, not your sole, but then we can take a look at that shoe and see how it's wearing and tearing on you, and get some good information as a shoe company as to how do we do this better? How how often is this person wearing these shoes? Because you can see how fast it's consuming, what's happening in these days.
And that's such a potential for shoe companies as well, because they can really provide a service to that. So it's not just product-based, it's really like, it could be like even a health advice. Saying, there's too much pressure on this area, they want to get this checked out and all that, because this precise data, and as you said, AI can deal with such complex sets of data. You can tick certain boxes, and then there could be some alarm saying, like in a notification, well, maybe make an appointment with your cardiac experts.
My Apple Watch is already doing it. So why can't my shoes tell me pieces like that as well?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So it's
too soon. Who knows?
They do. It's called Nike.
At this moment, again, for all those data, again, it's not allowed to personalize these data, and I do agree with that. So that's illegal to make so that a shoe company, for instance, could monitor how we walk and know the data, whether we might have a medical issue or not. What you could think about is more the big data effect, where indeed, if we understand how quickly shoes wear and tear in certain areas, because indeed, for instance, making a comparison to African countries where you will have way more dirt roads, where the shoes, of course, have different wear and tear as opposed to asphalt and concrete that we walk on. That also inspires, not only for comfort reasons, what we might need to walk on in terms of sole compounds, but also in terms of abrasion. And one of the largest issues we face is microplastic waste through abrasion. so that you could optimize the abrasion resistance for the area that you that your customer walks in, basically.
Yeah.
So,
Talk about abrasion, because we have some shoe experts here. What do you think about the Balenciaga trainer?
the which one? The Paris one.
Really dug in for a few times, and now it's being sold for, I mean, the sum is not disclosed yet, but it will be.
No, it's 1,800 euros. It's
$1,000.
1750 or 1,800 euros. I think it's originally, I thought maybe, but it wasn't the case, that Demna Gvasalia, it's a difficult name, the creative director of Balenciaga, he's Georgian. And I was like, maybe this is a statement that has to do with war.
Yes.
Because I could imagine that this looks like shoes indeed, that if you die and you go into a grave and they dig you up after a couple of months or years, that's what your shoes look like.
Yes.
So I thought, is this a statement? Clearly not, if I see the rest of what Balenciaga is. So, and in those cases, I just think it's kind of like holding up a mirror to the fashion industry, because of course this is bullshit. I mean, I have no other word for it. If people buy that, be my guest. If this is what you want to spend 1,700 euros on, be my guest. Is this what we need in the industry? No. I mean, we have so many more things to solve. And unfortunately, yeah, this is the level of nonsense that we see presenting to us, where you're like, really? Okay, well, whatever.
Yeah.
So
in the sustainability and the Anthropocene, to really kind of make a statement piece like that probably goes in the wrong direction.
Yes.
yeah, I could have imagined this as a statement, and I also could have, because he did comment on things like this before, so I could have imagined this coming from him, that this was about that, but apparently the way it's communicated now, it's not about that. And then at least make it about biodegradability of shoes or something. I don't know, but could help. I mean, the only thing that it could do, if we have to think of anything positive, is that it would make the look of mycelium more popular. So it's basically the fungi material that actually, you have several varieties of mycelium that also look like fungus for your feet, which of course, I mean, I personally don't find that very attractive, but it actually looks quite similar to.
If Balenciaga's doing it, hey.
No, come on. So then if it does that, so that people would like to have unfinished mycelium shoes. So had they done it that way, then again, I would have been very positive. If they would have said, listen, what we're actually looking for, the only message that I would say, what we're actually looking for is shoes. If people wear the shoes for a short time, which you will do with this, because it already falls apart before you even put your foot in it. But if you, but if you,
it's that idea that sustainability requires a new aesthetic, and that we're going to have to make aesthetic changes.
A new aesthetic and different thoughts on lifespan. So if we only wear a shoe for 3 to 6 months, which is, so there's research from the American Footwear Association that I work with, that on average, say when we look at lifespan, what do people find durable? It's about 30% of people less than 6 months, 30% is 6 months to a year, and then 30% is more than a year. So that's already quite short, right?
Yeah.
Because shoes should technically last longer. But if indeed this 30%, especially that is looking at less than 6 months, then instead of, shaming those people into trying to wear their shoe longer, you could also go the other route and say, okay, if you only use it for 6 months, I'm making you a product that will only last for 6 months and will automatically disintegrate. And then probably it will look like the Balenciaga Paris sneaker after 6 months. And then you could sell it on for 1,750 euros. Make that into an NFT.
We will.
Yeah, it was really timely. My father sent me an image yesterday of a shirt he bought. He was wearing a shirt he bought in 1966 in Congo.
Oh, wow.
It's a perfect shirt, it was hand sewn, a really nice fabric.
And technically, I mean, the testing requirements for shoes and materials have not changed so much. So they are still tested as if they are supposed to last about 5 years. 3 to 5 is the average that they, in terms of flex testing, abrasion, and all of that. reality is different. So yeah, the route that people now tend to follow is very much trying to persuade consumers to not buy stuff so often new, but at the same time people are bombarded every day and persuaded to buy new stuff. So I find that always a very interesting thing, to try and shame consumers into consuming less while we are still at the same time bombarding those same people with buy more. So that's why I would probably, especially for the short term, be much more in favor of design for very short lifespan, but then harmless.
Yeah.
So instead of complaining that our current biofabricated materials might not yet meet the strength requirements of leather or plastics, why don't we embrace that and say, well, but this is a fully home compostable material. Indeed, this shoe is going to last you 6 months. Great, that's exactly what we want.
Yeah.
And then you compost it at home, and then you still have something much more sustainable than the things that might last longer but are simply not used that long.
But part of that is going to be knowing where the person's wearing that shoe and
Yes.
how much water there is on the ground and the environment that they come into. And that's where I think that, bio and data, when they come together, that's when we start to get some real magic happening, because we can design for environments and design for places.
Yeah.
Really make it 6 months, in Munich, or 6 months in Ethiopia.
Yeah. And it's really exciting because there's so much, there's so many textile packs happening, and there could be shoe packs as well integrated in that. There's so much happening on the European level right now. In Germany, we have the green button. I mean, that's another discussion.
Yeah.
But there's a textile pack from New York, in California, a lot has happened as well. So, I mean,
the extended producer responsibility that Europe's adopted rapidly, that's going to be wild.
Exactly. So we bring all those topics into that as well. And, there's possible part of that conversation, that you can give feedback online, and, so it's, I think, really exciting times to set those new frameworks to really adapt it to this new requirements.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think we've touched on a wide variety of subjects today.
I think that's what's interesting about data, is that it allows you to do a lot, but you have to get it focused and get it nailed down.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
So watch this space, watch the social space,
watch the virtual space.
Watch the virtual space, and check out Mac's gallery as well. It's like a virtual gallery. I mean, actually, you can go in Munich to the shop window display where he has his gallery. If
Maybe
you check,
say where it is.
I'm just about to. So you can go on to his Instagram account, or if you just look for Dawn of the Metaverse, you find everything there, and everything will be happening there till the end of July. And again, if you're in the city, if you're out and about with this beautiful weather in Munich today, pop by. We're here till 4 o'clock. You can talk to us. There are the prototypes as well, and everything will be 3D scanned. Will be on the VR platform. We're going to communicate soon with the co-ops and everything else. And yes, very happy to done this workshop. It's been great fun, and again, thank you for the sponsors. Thank you for being here. And
you're welcome. It was great fun. So I will definitely be in touch with both you ladies for talking some further, and maybe we can even do a future workshop, do something similar in Barcelona. You'll be more than welcome. And
that would be fantastic. I'd love to have you in Munich as well, and maybe I take all of you to Ethiopia. There's some.
Let's do that.
And talk to people there as well. It's
you get very different perspectives.
To make sense of all of this.
Absolutely.
Again, thank you again to the City of Munich, the Kompetenzteam Kultur und Kreativwirtschaft of the City of Munich for being able to use this space, for the Wirtschaftsministerium Bayern and Bayern Design, and for
the Center of Expertise on Creative Innovation at the Amsterdam University of Applied Sciences for getting me here and letting me do this for a week. It's been very awesome.
Creative NL, and Markus, who's not on screen, but who's been following us.
Our amazing videographer.
And there's going to be great content on the socials as well. So Markus has been with us and documenting everything. It's going to be a really cool video. So thank you, Karina, for the video and offering that possibility for us. And thank you to you.
Thank you.
Very nice
meeting
you.
you.
And it was a great pleasure. And Christina for coming over all the way from London to be here in person. It's fantastic to meet people again. And do things in person after all these 2
It
years.
really
So
is.
it would be fantastic to meet you very soon as well.
Definitely. Ah, we're all waving. Bye, guys. Have a good weekend, guys.
Go enjoy the sun.
Bye.
See you later
Bye.
on.